I've always had a difficult time with this gospel reading, Luke 9, so I'm not going to preach on it. But I think it's funny when James and John say to Jesus, "Lord, do you want us to command fire to come down from heaven and consume them?" Has there ever been a dumber question asked to Jesus? But that would be great fireworks, wouldn't it? All right. As we pause for the 4th of July to celebrate our country, I think it's important to remember that this life that we live here in America is a gift. This freedom that we have is a gift. And while it's easy to see that we are not perfect, and that our country is not perfect, that I don't know of anywhere else doing it any better. And I think it's important as Americans to realize this gift of this country that we live in. And so I want to talk about that for a minute. This freedom that we have as Americans. And I was thinking, what does it mean what does freedom mean in America? What does that mean? I think the first is that we, as free people, have the right to believe or think whatever we want. We can think, believe whatever we want. We can, if you are dead set that the designated hitter is terrible for baseball, you're free to think that. If you think that the earth is flat, you are free to think that. You are free to worship any god you want. You're free to think and believe whatever you want. Nobody can tell you what to think. Nobody can tell you what to believe. It's a choice you make. But I was reminded of a simple truth this week. I was watching the news, and if you watch the news this week, there's a lot of trials going on, and I just couldn't understand how anybody can live their lives defending people that they know are guilty. And how you watch these people on the news, and they're trying every loophole they can to get their client off. And I just thought, man, that must be an unfulfilling life. And so I put that on Facebook. I shouldn't have, but I did. And someone said, Karen Carlson actually said, turn the TV off. That's probably a good piece of advice. Because I remember my degree is in communications, and I took a class, I had a dual degree with communications and political science. And the one thing that I learned that they taught us was that the media cannot tell you what to think, but they can tell you what to think about. And if you think about that, the things we talk about around the table on Sunday mornings are the things that we've seen in the media. And so we're talking about the things the media wants us to talk about. And so sometimes it's good to just unplug the TV, to just get away from the news for a little while, because then you can start to think about the things that are important to you. Maybe even pick up the Bible and start to think about the things that are important to God. So we have to be careful that nobody tells you what to think. But then we have freedom of speech, so we have the right to say what we want. So we can think what we want, we can say what we want. I'm sure you all know it's been a big news week in America. A lot has gone on down in Austin, in Washington, D.C. There's been a lot going on. And some people agree with what's going on, and some people disagree. And they've all taken to Facebook to say what they agree with and what they disagree with. And that's okay, because in America you have freedom of speech. You can say what you want. And that's great, because in other countries you can't. Now I'm not going to get into who's listening to what we say. But we can say it. And that's important that we know that. And if we don't like the way things are going, we can run for office ourselves. I have a friend who's a member of Calvary who doesn't, for a long time, has been frustrated with the way things are going. And she has stood up and said, you know what? I'm running for office. And she's running for state senate. And I'm so proud of her. I don't agree with her on everything, but I'm proud of her that she said, you know what? I'm fed up with it, and I'm going to run for senator. And to think a woman is running for senate, that's amazing. Because in other places in the world, women can't even vote. This country is great that people are free to do that. And I wish her all the best. So freedom in America is freedom of thought, freedom of speech, and freedom of action. Why is it a gift of grace? Why are these freedoms grace? We are in the sermon series, a Summer of Grace. And so what does this have to do with grace? Well, freedom itself is a grace. Because most of us have done nothing to earn it. It has been a gift given to us based on where we were born, the country that we live in. Now, I know some of you have fought overseas to defend our way of life. Thank you for that. But our gift of grace has been given to us because of people who have died defending and fighting for our freedoms. Carol Renwick and Don this week are at Gettysburg. And they're there because this is the 150th anniversary of the Battle of Gettysburg. And Carol's related to somebody. Larry, who's Carol?
It's one of the ministers at the Lutheran College.
One of the ministers at the Lutheran College who was there during the battle and was providing spiritual support for the soldiers. And 150 years ago, that battle was fought. And I was looking on the internet yesterday. I saw a picture 100 years ago where veterans from both sides met at Gettysburg and shook hands. Because a lot of people didn't have that opportunity. A lot of people died that day, and many days that surrounded that war, fighting, and in other wars, the Revolutionary War and the World Wars, fighting for this gift of freedom that we have. And that is why the freedom that we have in this country is grace. But there are limits to our freedom. There are limits to our freedom here in America. I looked up the definition of freedom from Webster's Dictionary, and it says freedom is the absence of necessity, coercion, or constraint in choice or action. And I was thinking, I think we are constrained by the law, by the laws of our land. So we aren't really truly free to do whatever we want. On Thursday, I was at the South Lake Police Department sitting in with the officers as they were getting briefed. And the officers just were talking about some of the things that were going on, some of the people that they've come into contact with, and just how surprised I was at how evil some people are. And how much more I was impressed by our police officers who are dedicated, committed to protecting and serving us, because there are people who cannot live within the constraints of the law. There are certain limits to our freedom, but it is for the general good, for the good of our neighbors. But there's some people who just can't live inside of those. And so while we are free, there are certain limits to that freedom, which gets me to the Bible and Christianity. Our text today, Galatians 5, for freedom Christ has set us free. What does it mean to be a free Christian? Luther wrote on this. Luther wrote a long essay on this, but the highlight of the essay is, he writes, a Christian man, or a Christian, is the most free Lord of all and subject to none. Most free Lord of all and subject to none. So what does it mean to be free biblically? Sin, I think, is where it starts. We all start with sin. Sin doesn't control what we say, think, or do. Sin doesn't control that. Sin doesn't make us do bad things. We make that decision ourselves. Right? I mean, we might have friends who pressure us and chemicals who pressure us, but we make those decisions ourselves. And so while we may sin in thought, word, and deed, it's not the sin forcing us to do it. It's our own. We're free. We're free to make that choice. We're free whether it be good or whether it be bad. We're free whether to follow God or sin. That's freedom. God could have made us all little robots that did nothing but good. All we were capable of is good, but God said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to make you free. I'm going to give you the choice. You can do good, you can do bad. It's up to you. I'm not going to make you do anything. So that's freedom. That's grace. Sin is grace. The ability and freedom to sin is grace. And that sounds weird, but it's true. But not only are we free to sin, we are free from sin, or the punishments of sin anyway, which is death, hell. Punishment of sin is hell. And we have been freed from hell. We have been freed from punishment. We have been freed from guilt. We have been freed from worry. Have you ever sinned and worried about, oh man, what did I do? What did I do? Did I ruin my life? Am I going to hell? You have been freed from that worry. So what are we supposed to do then? What does it mean to be freed? Paul says you've been freed to be free. That's all I said. You've been freed to be free. What does that mean? What does it mean to be free? I think it means to not worry, to have fun, to enjoy life, to enjoy love, to love one another. How do you do that, though? In the same sentence, Luther says a Christian man is free, most free Lord of all, and subject to none. He says, but a Christian man is the most dutiful servant of all and subject to everyone. I don't understand Luther sometimes. He likes to make a point and then just immediately make the opposite point, and so it makes it hard. But what he says is basically that you are free to do whatever it is that you want to do. But if you love God, you will choose to love each other, because that's what God calls us to do. And so in loving each other, you will serve each other. But not out of being coerced to do it or constrained to do it, but out of choosing to do it, choosing to love one another. Because Jesus chose to die for you. Jesus chose to die for you, for Luther, for Paul when Paul was writing this. And that is the motivation for serving one another. So, how is it that we serve others? This week we feed them. We fed, 2 weeks we fed kids. Hungry kids showed up. And Jane said, they were like sharks when we first get there. It's the time to eat yet, it's the time to eat yet, they're setting up. These kids are hungry. And you know what you do with hungry people? You feed them. And then after we fed them, the kids wanted to play. And they were playing with balls and stuff. And they were playing this one game. It was like volleyball, but instead of hitting it, they were throwing it. So I'm like, can I play? And then they're like, yeah. And they brought me in. But it's, you play with them. But you play by their rules. Which means you usually don't win. Because once you've won, they change the rules. And you teach them. You go on a mission trip. And you teach them. You give them the first Bible they've ever had. You build bookcases and you do art projects with mothers who have never done an art project with their kids before. You change lives. This church is far from perfect. This state is far from perfect. This country is far from perfect, and so is this world. But you and I have been freed to do something about it. We can change the world. We choose to love one another and serve one another. Amen.